Hey there, and welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are diving into a pretty radical paradigm shift in the world of psychology. It turns out that pretty much everything we've been taught about finding our self-worth, pushing ourselves to succeed, and building up our confidence, well, it might actually be entirely wrong.
So, think about this for a second. Could the pursuit of self-esteem actually be holding you back? I know, it sounds crazy. Our culture is just completely obsessed with being special, right? We have to be above average, and we're constantly evaluating our worth against everybody else. But what if that exhausting, endless chase to prove ourselves is exactly the thing that's making us all so incredibly anxious and insecure?
Okay, let's map out our journey real quick so you know where we're headed. We'll start by looking at the self-esteem trap, then we'll bust some self-compassion myths. After that, we'll dive into the 3 core pillars, look at the science of kindness, discuss healing trauma and PTSD, and finally, we'll wrap things up with some actionable ways to build your compassion muscle.
All right, Section 1, the self-esteem trap.
For decades, we've basically been spoon-fed this idea that high self-esteem is the golden ticket to happiness. But the data, it actually shows a much darker side. The relentless pursuit of self-esteem very often leads to narcissism, totally unstable self-worth, and this constant draining need to feel superior to the people around us. It's essentially a fragile, competitive evaluation of worth. It's literally like a sugar high. I mean, it feels amazing when you succeed, but the absolute second you make a mistake, you crash straight into despair. Self-compassion, on the other hand, gives us this stable, resilient foundation. It's about overall acceptance based on our shared human experience. It simply doesn't abandon you when the chips are down.
Moving right along to Section 2, busting self-compassion myths.
Now, before we can truly embrace this new mindset, we kind of have to unlearn a few things. First off, let's be clear. Self-compassion is absolutely not selfish. In fact, the studies show it actually makes you much more caring and supportive in your relationships with other people. And it is not narcissistic. Self-compassionate people don't walk around thinking they're uniquely special, they just accept life's curveballs. It's also not self-pity, that isolating woe-is-me attitude. And honestly, above all else, it is certainly not a weakness. In reality, letting go of that harsh self-criticism is one of the most powerful, rock-solid sources of resilience available to us.
Section 3, the 3 core pillars.
So how do we actually do this? Pioneering researcher Dr. Kristen Neff developed a really foundational, scientifically backed framework for it. The very first pillar is self-kindness. Simply put, this means being gentle and understanding with ourselves instead of being harshly critical and judgmental. Think about it. You would never look at your best friend and call them a worthless failure just because they made a mistake, right? No way. You'd offer them warmth and understanding. So the goal here is that we have to learn to deliberately turn that exact same kindness inward.
The second pillar is common humanity. And this one requires a pretty profound shift in how we see things. You see, trauma, failure, mistakes, they often make us feel so deeply isolated. We literally think, I am the only one struggling with this. Recognizing our common humanity means deeply understanding that imperfection and pain are shared human experiences. It connects us to the rest of the world rather than making us feel like we're just uniquely broken. And the final pillar is mindfulness. This is really about holding our experience in a balanced awareness. We observe our difficult emotions right in the present moment, without ignoring our pain or trying to shove it down. But, and this is absolutely crucial, we also observe it without over-identifying with it. We don't exaggerate it, and we don't let ourselves drown in it.
Which brings us to Section 4, the science of kindness.
You might be wondering, does this actually work when the pressure is really on? Well, check out this fascinating mock job interview study. Undergraduates were brought in and asked to write down an answer to that absolute worst interview question, what is your greatest weakness? The results were so incredibly telling. The high self-esteem group, they experienced significant anxiety and started using evasive, super defensive language. But the self-compassion group stayed completely calm. And even more fascinating, they naturally used plural pronouns like we instead of I. That sense of interconnectedness literally buffered their anxiety. They could admit their flaws without their entire sense of self-worth just completely collapsing.
Section 5, healing trauma and PTSD.
Now, this concept scales up dramatically, way beyond just everyday anxieties. Take a look at this quote from the Austin Trauma Therapy Center. It's profoundly telling. They say, self-compassion quiets the voice that says, I'm broken, and replaces it with, I'm healing. For trauma survivors, a really harsh inner critic often feeds an immense amount of shame. And that shame, it keeps the nervous system trapped in a constant state of fight or flight. Self-compassion directly reduces that shame. It brings the nervous system back to baseline and builds the emotional resilience needed to do deep, therapeutic work.
To prove just how uniquely effective this is, researchers over at UCLA are actually conducting a clinical trial right now using mindful self-compassion, or MSC. To put the stakes into perspective, the participants are unhoused women dealing with severe PTSD and substance use disorder in a residential treatment facility. Past studies already show that MSC is a remarkably safe, low-risk, and profoundly holistic way to manage complex trauma. Why? Because it fosters self-kindness without forcing patients to directly confront incredibly painful traumatic memories right out of the gate. It's a much gentler entry point.
Finally, Section 6. Building your compassion muscle. So, how can we actively rewire our brains at home? Well, practicing self-compassion is quite literally a workout for your brain. Thanks to neuroplasticity, your brain has the ability to physically change and adapt over time. The more you practice kindness, the faster and smoother those brain pathways become. You're strengthening existing positive connections and growing entirely new ones. Now, I won't lie, it might feel totally unnatural at first, but with practice, being kind to yourself will become an automatic reflex.
As you start doing this, there's a fascinating phenomenon you really need to be prepared for. It's called backdraft. Think about a house fire. When you open a door, the fire suddenly pulls in fresh oxygen and flares up. Similarly, when you finally start showing yourself unfamiliar kindness, old negative emotions, physical sensations like chest tightness, or even intrusive thoughts might just unexpectedly surface. This discomfort is completely normal. Acknowledging and validating this backdraft is simply part of the process of letting all that old pain out.
To help you manage daily stressors and handle any of that backdraft that arises, here is a highly effective, tangible mindfulness tool you can use. It's called the Here and Now Stone. First, just choose a small object that resonates with you, maybe a smooth rock or a specific piece of jewelry. Second, engage with it. Notice its texture, feel its temperature. Third, use it for grounding. Let it anchor you away from the chaos in your head and bring you right back into the present moment. And finally, carry it daily. It acts as this physical reminder to just pause, check in with yourself, and ask, hey, what do I need right now?
Another fantastic evidence-based technique to build this muscle is called soothing touch. This includes things like placing a hand softly on your cheek, cradling your face, gently stroking your arms, or just crossing your arms to give yourself a gentle squeeze. I know it might sound a little too simple, but studies show that these physical self-soothing techniques actually release oxytocin. They provide a deep sense of security and measurably reduce cardiovascular stress. Our bodies respond so powerfully to physical warmth, even when it's just coming from our own two hands.
Well, that brings us to the end of our explainer. I really want to leave you with this one question. Will you continue the exhausting, honestly impossible chase to always be above average? Or will you finally start treating yourself like a friend? The science is abundantly clear here. It is time to drop the fragile self-esteem trap and embrace the steady, resilient, and deeply healing power of self-compassion. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this sparks a brand new, much kinder relationship with yourself moving forward.